Hello everybody. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well. Here in New Zealand, it is halfway between Easter and Anzac Day. I think it's Anzac Day that's coming up. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. In which case, because it's effectively 2 long weekends, there's a lot of people who've taken this week off just to spread it out and make a bit more of a holiday. Not me. I'm at home. I work at home. It's just same old, same as usual sort of thing. Anyway, yes, and back into the sleeveless shirts just because once again it's got warm, even though it's still overcast and a bit rainy, but that's just the way things are. And I'm just looking across at my other monitor to check on something, as I usually do, which you know all about, and we're about ready to go. So what's up? Not a lot of exciting things happening here. Sorry, I just need to have a quick drink of water. Bit of indigestion. It happens from time to time. Anyway, so, right. Sorted. The second monitor is going. The camera is going. The sound is going, as far as I know. I should probably check my phone in case someone has messaged me to say that there's an issue with something, but I haven't heard anything yet. Have a quick look down here and see if I can find the right place in case they have messaged me. Just because last time we had my voice was apparently doubling up. I'm using it the way it's meant to be being used at the moment. As far as I know, it's actually working properly. So, there you go. Yeah, I'm just going to hide the other camera label that's on here. No, it's not got that. It's hidden in the mixer, just so I don't keep on looking at the wrong thing. Right. What are we doing? We're still reading Emily of New Moon. We're just over halfway through, coming up towards 2/3 of the way through. She seems to be in some ways settling into the community a little bit more now. She's made some friends of her own who aren't friends with her just because she's the new girl and just because she's from the posh family. Who really aren't doing particularly any posher than anybody else. They've just got a certain standard for the way they like to do things. And so it's known amongst the parents of the children at school that that's what the Murrays of New Moon are like. Even if there's, apart from Emily, there's not really anyone of her generation who's involved with the school or anything like that. What else? She's been off and visited the Catholic priest to see if he will have words with the neighbour, Lofty John, about the fact that Lofty John wants to cut down the woods between their place, effectively between their place and his place, I think it is. But it's land that's his land, but the girls, that's Emily and her friend, have been using it for building huts and all sorts of things like this. And it also protects New Moon from the storms that come in from the ocean. They can see in through gaps in the trees, but it actually stops the wind from really blasting their property. And it's the north wind. They're in the northern hemisphere. They're over on the east coast of Canada. So when the north wind is blowing, that's from Greenland. It's rather cold. Yeah. So hopefully for them, they'll be able to get that one sorted out. What else? Can't remember anything else at the moment. But we're going to get on with the story in a minute. So just a quick introduction for those of you who are new here. Hi, I'm Jev. I read old-fashioned children's stories because otherwise nobody gets to hear them anymore. I grew up with lots of them. I read them myself. I had them read to me. A lot of the stories I've read up until now are books that I have read for myself, and they were books that were copies that belonged to either my parents or my grandparents, and they had read them themselves when they were children as well. Early teens, that sort of thing. Anyway, big family of readers, a family of big readers. Not fancy readers, just we love reading. We're not posh at all. So I do have 3 tips. 3 tips. 1, make sure you have something to drink. 2, make sure you have a snack. And today I have, rattle, 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 good old Kiwi snack log. So 1, water. 2, a snack. 3, somewhere comfortable to sit, and I'm not going to wave a beanbag or a chair at you. You can do that for yourself. If you like to lurk, you are most welcome here. You don't have to say that you're lurking, but if you would like me to say hi to you, if you're only lurking just because you're in the middle of doing something, or you like just being quiet and watching, but you're quite happy for me to say hi to you in public like this, then hit the lurk notification, which is, the lurk command is !lurk, L-U-R-K, and it will probably just acknowledge that you are lurking. And then sit back and enjoy. If you are someone who needs to be studying or working or doing chores or something like that, and you like to have somebody to listen to while you're doing that, most welcome here. Most welcome to carry on and not be focusing on me entirely. This is definitely not an audiobook style of reading. There's nothing perfect about it. I often interrupt myself to explain things. I'm old enough to have a lot of life experience, and also because of the wide range of my reading over the years, there's a lot of things that I understand that are in old books that maybe people who are younger than me, or sorry, I have an itchy nose, probably because I went and saw the cat just before. He's got very, very, very fine hair, and sometimes it'll sit on you and tickle you without you even realising it's there. You don't see it until you've looked really closely. This fine wispy hair. Anyway, so like that, I will interrupt myself. I will explain things. Often older authors who were writing in their own time period, if it was something that was very, very common for them, they wouldn't explain something because they knew that most of their readers at the time would understand. Occasionally they will explain something in a story. If there's something about the story that's a little bit outside of the normal realm of experience of their readers, in their opinion, then they will explain that within the story. But otherwise they will just carry on as normal, because for them it is normal. So that sort of stuff I do have a tendency to explain if I think that you, my listeners, don't actually have, may not have an understanding of that. And it's just one of those trying to help people to broaden their minds a little bit, understand a little bit more. But yeah, it's more mainly to enable you to actually enjoy the story, because you understand the implications and the context of a lot of that sort of thing. So that's it. I ramble a lot. I do. I'm also terrible at accents. We ended up with an Irish accent kind of last time because the priest is Irish, apparently. In the story it came out that he was Irish in terms of the way some of his sentences were structured and some of the words that he used, but in no way is my accent Irish. It's a very, very fake Irish accent. So yeah, I make no claim to fame on the standard of my accents. They're usually hilarious rather than accurate. Lots of fun. I do get lost on the page often. I was going to say sometimes, but it's a lot too frequent to call it sometimes. I get very easily distracted. Halfway through a sentence that I'm actually reading out loud, I will get lost. Hopefully it's not too often. It's usually once or twice in a read through. But that's just the way life is. I do have ADHD. My brain gets little rabbit trails that go sideways, and sometimes that will be why. Sometimes it's just because my eyes have jumped a line or two and I can't find it. Strange. Anyway, so we'll carry on, shall we? We're about 2/3 of the way through Emily of New Moon, and we are going to continue. This chapter is very short, so it's going to be at least 2 chapters today, I would say. But yes, if we have a particularly long chapter, then often I will only read one chapter, and it will very much depend on the author. This particular author so far has given us long chapters. This is the first short one. Some of our other authors have consistently given us a lot of little chapters, and so I've read a whole lot of chapters, and I chat in between the chapters often, just like I'm chatting at the beginning. And then other times we will get authors who have actually varied their chapter length a lot. It's quite interesting as someone who's done a little bit of writing, nothing that's been published, and thinking of the story and how it comes together and stuff. Some people, the way they write lends itself to... Sorry about that. Lends itself to a series of long chapters. Some other authors, the way they write it lends itself to a series of short chapters, and others like me, you just write the chapter length that's appropriate for what you're trying to say at the time. Anyway, so we'll carry on, shall we, and read the story. This is Emily of New Moon by L.M. Montgomery, famous for having written the Anne of Green Gables books. Oh dear, lots of tickly throats and things. Chapter 19. Pause for reading Roman numerals out loud. I can read them easily in my head. It's out loud. Chapter 19. Friends Again. That sounds hopeful. Emily listened very anxiously on Monday morning, but no sound of axe, no ponderous hammer rang in Lofty John's bush. I'm thinking that's a quote from some poem because it's in quotation marks. That evening, on her way home from school, Lofty John himself overtook her in his buggy, and for the first time since the night of the apple, stopped and accosted her. "Will ye take a lift, Miss Emily of New Moon?" he said affably. That's in a friendly manner. Emily climbed in, feeling a little bit foolish, but Lofty John looked quite friendly as he clucked to his horse. "So you've clean wiled the heart out of Father Cassidy's body," he said. "The sweetest scrap of a girl I've ever seen," he says to me. "Sure, and you might have leave the poor priests alone." So it sounds like Lofty John's meant to be Irish too. Oh dear, please don't let them both be in the same chapter. Emily looked at Lofty John out of the corner of her eye. He did not seem angry. "You've put me in a nice fix of it," he went on. "I'm as proud as any New Moon Murray of ye all, and your Aunt Elizabeth said a number of things that got under my skin. I've many an old score to settle with her, so I thought I'd get square by cutting of the bush down, and ye had to go and quare me with me priest because of it, and now I make no doubt I'll be after daring to cut a stick of kindling to warm me shivering carcass without asking leave of the Pope." Oh dear. He's worried that he's going to have to get permission for any wood he needs to cut now. "Oh, Mr. Sullivan, are you going to leave the bush alone?" said Emily breathlessly. "It all rests with yourself, Miss Emily of New Moon. You can't be after expecting Lofty John to be too humble. I didn't come by the name because of me makeness. It's written make, M-A-K-E-N-E-S-S. That's so that you hear his accent in your head. Makeness. I didn't come by the name because of me makeness. "What do you want me to do?" she said. "First, then, I'm wanting you to let bygones be bygones in that matter of the apple, and be token of the same, come over and talk to me now and then, as you did last summer," and by a token, as a way of doing it. "Sure now, and I've missed ye that spitfire of an Ilse who has never come either because she thinks I mistreated you." "I'll come, of course," said Emily doubtfully, "if only Aunt Elizabeth will let me." "Tell her if she don't, the bush'll be cut down, every last stick of it. That'll fetch her. And there's one more thing. You must ask me rael make him polite to do you the favour of not cutting down the bush. If you do it pretty enough, sure, never a tree will I touch. But if you don't, down they go, priest or no priest," concluded Lofty John. Emily summoned, so she has to ask him as nicely as she can not to cut down the bush. Emily summoned all her wiles to her aid. She clasped her hands. She looked up through her lashes at Lofty John. She smiled as slowly and seductively as she knew how, and Emily had considerable native knowledge of that sort. "Please, Mr. Lofty John," she coaxed, "won't you leave me the dear bush I love?" Lofty John swept off his crumpled old felt hat. To be sure, and I will. A proper Irishman always does what a lady asks him. Sure, and it's been the ruin of us. We're at the mercy of the petticoats. If you'd come and said that to me afore, you'd have no need of your walk to Whitecross. But mind ye keep the rest of the bargain. The reds are ripe, and the scabs soon will be, and all the rats have gone to glory. So he's dealt with the rats, which is why he was supposedly doing the poisoning the apple to deal with the rats. The reds are the red-skinned apples, and the scabs are the russeted apples. They're a lot sweeter. Emily flew into New Moon Kitchen like a slim whirlwind. "Aunt Elizabeth, Lofty John isn't going to cut down the bush. He told me he wouldn't, but I have to go and see him sometimes, if you don't object." "I suppose it wouldn't make a difference to you if I did," said Aunt Elizabeth. But her voice was not so sharp as usual. She would not confess how much Emily's announcement relieved her, but it mellowed her attitude considerably. "There's a letter here for you. I want to know what it means." Oh dear. Emily took the letter. It was the first time she had ever received a real letter through the mail, and she tingled with the delight of it. It was addressed in a heavy black hand to Miss Emily Starr, New Moon, Blairwater. But "You opened it!" she cried indignantly. "Of course I did. You are not going to receive letters I am not to see, miss. What I want to know is how comes Father Cassidy to be writing to you and writing such nonsense?" "I went to see him on Saturday," confessed Emily, realising that the cat was out of the bag, "and I asked him if he couldn't prevent Lofty John from cutting down the bush." "Emily Bird Starr!" "I told him I was a Protestant," cried Emily. "He understands all about it, and he was just like anybody else. I like him better than Mr. Dare," who was their Presbyterian minister, I think. Excuse me. Aunt Elizabeth did not say much more. There did not seem to be much she could say. Besides, the bush was not going to be cut down. The bringer of good news is forgiven much. She contented herself with glaring at Emily, who was too happy and excited to mind glares. She carried her letter off to the garret dormer. That's the window up in the attic. Sorry, I need to, I think, get something through my throat that's not just water, so I'm going to have a bit of this. And see if that will get the saliva working a bit better. Sorry about that. I've just remembered I have a throat lozenge here. I should unwrap it so it's ready to go, because I have a feeling I may need it. I'm trying to find where I got to on the page. She carried her letter off to the garret dormer and gloated over the stamp and the superscription a bit before she took out the enclosure. "Dear Pearl of Emily's," wrote Father Cassidy, "I've seen our lofty friend, and I feel sure your green outpost of fairyland will be saved for your moonlit revels. I know you do dance there by light o' moon when mortals are snoring. I think you'll have to go through the form of asking Mr. Sullivan to spare those trees, but you'll find him quite reasonable. It's all in the knowing how and the time of the moon. How goes the epic in the language? I hope you'll have no trouble in freeing the child of the sea from her vows. Continue to be the friend of all good elves, and of your admiring friend, James Cassidy. P.S. The boy sends respects. What word have you for cat in your language? Sure, and you can't get You can't get anything cattier than cat, can you now? Lofty John spread the story of Emily's appeal to Father Cassidy far and wide, enjoying it as a good joke on himself, as being on the receiving end of the joke. Sorry, sticky fingers from the throat lozenge. Rhoda Stewart said she always knew Emily Starr was a bold thing, and Miss Brownell said she would be surprised at nothing Emily Starr would do, and Dr. Burnley called her a little devil more admiringly than ever. And Perry said she had pluck, and Teddy took credit for suggesting it, and Aunt Elizabeth endured, and Aunt Laura thought it might have been worse, but Cousin Jimmy made Emily feel very happy. It would have spoiled the garden and broken my heart, Emily, he told her. You're a little darling girl to have prevented it. One day, a month later, when Aunt Elizabeth had taken Emily to Shrewsbury to fit her out with a winter coat, they met Father Cassidy in a store. Aunt Elizabeth bowed with great stateliness, but Emily put out a slender hand. What about the dispensation from Rome? Whispered Father Cassidy. He's asking about her story. One Emily was quite horrified lest Aunt Elizabeth should overhear and think she was having sly dealings with the Pope, such as no good Presbyterian half-Murray of New Moon should have. The other Emily thrilled to her toes with the dramatic delight of a secret understanding of mystery and intrigue. She nodded gravely, her eyes eloquent with satisfaction. I got it without any trouble, she whispered back. Fine, said Father Cassidy. I wish you good luck, and I wish it hard. Goodbye. Farewell, said Emily, thinking it a word more in keeping with dark secrets than goodbye. She tasted the flavour of that half-stolen interview all the way home, and felt quite as if she were living in an epic herself. She did not see Father Cassidy again for years. He was soon afterwards removed to another parish, but she always thought of him as a very agreeable and understanding person. Often, it's not how long we know someone, it's the context of how we know them that makes the biggest impression on us, the most lasting impression. That's the end of that chapter, by the way. So now you can officially have something to drink. Well, I can. And I think I will have this sticky thing rattling around my teeth. It'll help my throat to not be so dry. There you go. My hair's being all weird today. I think it's the weather. We still have stormy weather. It's not currently sunny. It was earlier on. It's not currently raining, and I think it was not right here, but across the water from us. Where we live is a broader amphitheatre of a bay. So you've got the hills that run down, and then you've got the beach. It's a very stony, shelly beach. It's not a fancy beach. And then you've got the waters of Cow Bay. And then across the other side, you've got another peninsula of land that goes around. We're on one peninsula, and it's got a string of little bays on it and a big beach. And then you've got another peninsula that goes out the other way. So it's like this actually. So we're down here, and then there's another peninsula out here, and then there's an island here. And there's a little gap through here that the weather can get through and the boats can go in and out. And then there's another gap down here, but where we are here, we can see out that one, but we can't see this one because of this bit of land. But that gives us that semi-enclosed bit of water, so it gets rough, but not really rough. It's not enough for surfing or anything like that. But it means we can look out the window and look at the weather coming across the bay, the big bay, Cow Bay. So that's the name of the area. That's the big area of water, not just along our shore, but that's enclosed, almost like a lake, but with the tide and salt water. So, trying trying to get this to do a little bit more first before I start reading again. Have you got your pen and paper ready for any new words? Not just new words, but words that, or ideas that you get that you want to find out a little bit more about. I've got a place name, I think it is, written on my piece of paper, and it's not actually from today's story. It's actually from a photograph I saw. And I'm looking it up right now. It's actually a place in Slovenia, which is above Croatia. And the particular area has some quite dramatic looking mountains. It's the part of Slovenia that actually almost forms the border with Italy. And it's south of Austria. And I've been wanting to find out the name of this particular part because I couldn't remember it. I couldn't quite find it on the map, but I finally found it on the map. And then on top of that, something else came up that showed me on my phone, I think, or on my computer. And I thought, that sounds familiar. That looks familiar. And sure enough, that's what it was. So now I know what to look for. So we were sleeping in our van, like a little tradesman's van. And I'll see if I can find this picture here. I'll see if I can show you. Sorry, I haven't saved anything today. And so my computer's wanting me to scroll for ages before I actually find anything to show you, for where to save it. Right, I shall find you this picture and then you can see what I'm talking about. So the lower levels are just farming area, reasonably non-dramatic, but then behind it goes up and up and up. So this is just part of the view. It's the picture that I've found. Oh, I might save the other one too. Doesn't show so well. Anyway, so see this flat land down here? That's farmed. And it's got hills. The hills are not as steep as this bit here. They usually leave that in forest. There's beech forest and there's other types of trees there too. But this bit down here, this light green here, that's where they farm. And there are parts of it where it's kind of at a slope that's probably a bit like that, more like that. And they raise cattle and sheep and crops and all sorts of things like this. Anyway, and then they've got this big park, and then there's a valley here that comes, this line of this is only half of these mountains, and it's like a big basin, a big amphitheatre that comes round with this ring of mountains like this, and then you've got the forested bits down in the valley, and then at the very ends of the U shape, down on the tip of the U shape. Anyway, so we'd driven up a side road that was up through the back of here and had parked alongside the river. It was summertime. It wasn't likely for the river water to be rising or anything like that, so it was all safe. And just seeing if I can find a slightly more dramatic shot of it, the valley. I can't really, not one that's going to show you the way it appeared for us. Anyway, so we stayed in the forest alongside the river, parked in our van with the mattress on the floor, sleeping. And then we got up first thing in the morning, and my hubby decided he was going to go for a little bit of a walk because he woke up before me, and it was nice and cool. And so he started walking up the valley, and he came to a signpost that talked about a walking track. And so he comes back, says, "Do you want to go for a quick walk? There's a track up there, and it takes about however long to get to a waterfall." I think it said something like that. And so I put on my little canvas shoes, cheap version of Converse All-Stars, the low ones, very cheap version, with a little bit of a slightly supportive insert in them, and that's it. Not tramping shoes, not hiking shoes, not rambling shoes, not boots, not special socks. And we're just wearing our stuff that we're wearing because it's summertime and it's really hot, and it's a lot hotter than what it had been when we're up in the Netherlands, which is a lot further north than this. And so we start following this track up the valley alongside the river, and we go to a grazing area, which is one of the upper grazing areas traditionally, where families who lived down in the village down here, it used to be a village, would take their cattle, I think it was cattle, in wintertime they'd have them in their barns, and in spring and autumn they'd have them near the village on these lower paddocks, and then in the middle of summer they'd take them up to the upper grazing up here, a little bit like in Heidi, and they'd actually stay at a cabin that was up there where the upper pastures were, because there were different grasses up there, which was all very good for the health of their animals and all this sort of stuff. So we went up past one of these places, which has been revived. They no longer actually farm that way, but it's used as a place that you can go and visit and see the way they used to live, and pay to eat some of the food the way they used to prepare it when they were living up there in the mountains in summer. It was all closed up because it was too early in the day for any of that, and it was a little bit early in the summer season. Anyway, so we carried on up there and passed a little chapel that's been built to commemorate all the people who've died on the mountain. Just let you soak in that for a moment, take that bit of information in. A chapel built to commemorate everyone locally who has died on these mountains. So they're not insignificant. They're not huge, but they're not insignificant. Anyway, so we carry on up, and there's this narrow gorge that you go through, and it's got like stone walls, but it's just raw stone that the river has carved, and there's a track along one side of the river just above it that they have carved this track. A lovely river. And we walked up there, we carried on, and then there's an area where they've actually built a partial dam. It's actually a weir, so you have a wall that keeps the water above that level at a certain height, and then you get water overflows it and carries on down. They may have at some stage had a mill wheel or something, I don't know. No sign of it. And we got to the lower falls, which were the ones I had seen in the photo that made me go, I think I know where that is. This might be the place that I've been to. And so I had a look at that. And I thought, no, I'm pretty sure that's the lower falls, because they were interesting, cute, narrow little bits of waterfalls coming down over a rocky face. And then we carried on, and we had to climb up over rocks and around bits. And I'm in these canvas non-tramping shoes, thankfully not in my jandals. And it was quite steep, quite steep, because we were getting into the stuff that's this upper stuff, not this, but this bit here. And finally got to the upper falls, and you climb down this steep gorge into this little valley, which is where the river comes through, and you climb over some boulders, because every year the winter weather and the spring melt brings down some more rocks from the hill, and they have to put a new little bit of timber bridge or metal bridge across to get so you could see the waterfall, because everybody comes up. Apparently they do bus trips to come and see these two waterfalls, the lower one and the upper one. And you go across and you take photos looking up at the waterfall, and it's got an upper level, and then it's got a tiny shelf with a little pool in it, but you can't see it. It's just a shelf that you can see. and then it has another section that falls down, and it's very dramatic, quite pretty. And there's while we're there's a couple of other people arrive, and they're all wearing tramping boots, proper lace-up boots that come up over your ankle, and they've got hiking poles and all sorts of things like this, and proper things around their neck and little backpacks and everything like this. They look like they do this sort of thing all the time. Seriously, they don't look like they're pretending. They look like this is serious. And because you can actually continue on the track past the waterfall and do a great big hike that goes across over the back past these mountains here and down the other side and go to some other places, and that's probably what they were going to do, but they're all kitted out for it. But it looks like there's actually a cable, a wire rope fastened to the rocks on one side of the waterfall, and you can use that to help you get up to that little shelf and stand between the two sections of the waterfall. So we did that. Me, with my grey hair, in my 50s, looking definitely overweight, and there's this couple down there, and then there's another couple arrives, and they're not quite so robust as the first ones, but they're all looking up at us and saying, how did you get up there? And we said, well, just use that cable there and pull yourself up over the rocks and this sort of thing. And they're like, but wasn't it hard? Well, you know whether or not you're capable of pulling yourself up a rock face on something like that. It's not like it's actually you need to bring your own ropes and hammer in the hooks or anything like that. It's actually set up for this. It's a proper track this part you can't go past it, but so you can get up to where the shelf is and then go back down again. So it's not that complicated, and you can see where to put your feet and all this. And I'm like, but why is it so hard to them? And I'm thinking, in the end I figured out it's because it's not quite the standard thing that everybody does. It was a little bit beyond what their imagination said you could do. Anyway, so my excitement this week was discovering, and I think it was today, exactly where this is. I'd kind of found where it was on a map book, but when you look on a map at something which is walking tracks, and the maps that you're using are designed for vehicles, it's very, very hard to find something like that. And if you're looking on Google Earth, because it's not somewhere that's hugely popular in America, it doesn't have the satellite photo coverage that you have if you're somewhere that's very popular for Americans. So that was my fun for today, but it's really dramatic backdrop, these mountains here. So before breakfast, I climbed halfway up there. Anyway, carrying on with the reading. So back to Emily of New Moon. We are now up to chapter 20, because we were having chapter 19 before. Sorry. Just turned the throat lozenge over because it was catching on the side of my teeth and it was getting uncomfortable on the gums. Anyway, so that was my fun for today. Yeah, there's two sets of waterfalls, and it's quite, in its own little way, quite dramatic. And I'm quite pleased with myself that I actually managed to do it. My feet were very, very tired afterwards. But yeah, we made it. It was, as we were coming back down, there were like 2 busloads of people hiking up, but they're all wearing boots and they've got their walking poles and their neckerchiefs on and their special windbreakers and jackets and everything like this. But literally, they were a bus trip, 2 bus trips. And here I was in my little shoes that I wear around home or to go to the supermarket in, only because I don't like wearing bare feet out. I wear them at home normally. Anyway, we'll carry on. Emily of New Moon by L.M. Montgomery. We are reading chapter 20 by Ariel Post. There you go, by Ariel Post. Just check that I've actually got this muted. Sorry, I don't really want to have extra noises. And the extra sound that you can hear, the whoof whoof sort of noise, is the wind in our chimney, which is right next to my office. It's a metal chimney. My office, this is the roof right here. You can hear it. And the chimney goes up into the higher part of it right next to me, but it's in the same small space. And so you hear the wind blowing across the top. So, Emily of New Moon, Chapter 20 by Ariel Post. Dearest Father, my heart is very sore tonight. Mike died this morning. Cousin Jimmy says he must have been poisoned. Oh, Father dear, I felt so bad. He was such a lovely cat. I cried and cried and cried. Aunt Elizabeth was disgusted. She said, "You did not make half so much fuss when your father died." What a cruel speech. Aunt Laura was nicer, but when she said, "Don't cry, dear, I will get you another kitten," I saw she didn't understand either. I don't want another kitten. If I had millions of kittens, they wouldn't make up for Mike. Ilse and I buried him in Lofty John's bush. I am so thankful the ground wasn't frozen yet. Aunt Laura gave me a shoebox for a coffin and some pink tissue paper to wrap his poor little body in, and we put a stone over the grave, and I said, "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord." When I told Aunt Laura about it, she was horrified and said, "Oh, Emily, that was a dreadful thing. You should not have said that over a cat." And Cousin Jimmy said, "Don't you think, Laura, that an innocent little dumb creature has a share in God?" Emily loved him, and all love is part of God. And Aunt Laura said, "Maybe you are right, Jimmy, but I am thankful Elizabeth did not hear her." Cousin Jimmy may not be all there, but what is there is very nice. But, oh, Father, I am so lonesome for Mike tonight. Last night he was here playing with me, so cunning and pretty and smee, and now he is cold and dead in Lofty John's bush. December the 18th. Dear Father, I am here in the garret. The Wind Woman is very sorry about something tonight. She is sighing so sadly around the window. And yet the first time I heard her tonight, the flash came. I felt as if I had seen something that happened long, long ago, something so lovely that it hurt me. Cousin Jimmy says that there will be a snowstorm tonight. I am glad. I like to hear a storm at night. It is so cosy to snuggle down among the blankets and feel it can't get at you. Only when I snuggle, Aunt Elizabeth says I squirm. The idea of anyone not knowing the difference between snuggling and squirming. I am glad we will have snow for Christmas. The Murray dinner is to be at New Moon this year. It is our turn. Last year it was at Uncle Oliver's, but Cousin Jimmy had grip and couldn't go, so I stayed home with him. It's a particular type of stomach ache, GRIPPE. I will be right in the thick of it this year, and it excites me. I will write you all about it after it is over, dearest. I want to tell you something, Father. I am ashamed of it, but I think I'll feel better if I tell you all about it. Last Saturday, Ella Lee had a birthday party, and I was invited. Aunt Elizabeth let me put on my new blue cashmere dress. It is a very pretty dress, and Aunt Elizabeth wanted to get dark brown, but a very pretty dress. Aunt Elizabeth wanted to get a dark brown, but Aunt Laura insisted on blue. I looked at myself in my glass, and I remembered that Ilse had told me her father told her I would be handsome if I had more colour. Oh dear. Oh dear. The possibilities here, the anticipation. If I had more colour, so I pinched my cheeks to make them red. I looked ever so much nicer, but it didn't last. Then I took an old red velvet flower that had once been in Aunt Laura's bonnet, and I wet it and then rubbed the red on my cheeks. I went to the party and the girls all looked at me, but nobody said anything. Only Rhoda Stewart giggled and giggled. I meant to come home and wash the red off before Aunt Elizabeth saw me, but she took a notion to call for me on her way home from the store. She did not say anything there, but when we got home she said, "What have you been doing to your face, Emily?" I told her, and I expected an awful scolding, but all she said was, Don't you know that you have made yourself cheap?" I did not know it. I did know it, too. I had felt all along, although I could not think of the right word for it before. "I will never do such a thing again, Aunt Elizabeth," I said. "You'd better not," she said. "Go and wash your face this instant." I did, and I was not half so pretty, but I felt ever so much better. Strange to relate, dear Father, I heard Aunt Elizabeth laughing about it in the pantry to Aunt Laura afterwards. You never can tell what will make Aunt Elizabeth laugh. I am sure it was ever so much funnier when Saucy Sal followed me to prayer meeting last Wednesday night, but Aunt Elizabeth never laughed a bit then. I don't often go to prayer meeting, but Aunt Laura couldn't go that night, so Aunt Elizabeth took me because she doesn't like to go alone. I didn't know Sal was following us until just as we got to the church, I saw her. I shooed her away, but after we went in, I suppose Sal sneaked in when someone opened the door and got upstairs into the gallery. And just as soon as Mr. Dare began to pray, Sal began to yowl. Saucy Sal is one of the cats. She's the kitchen cat. She keeps the rats out of the outdoor kitchen. Cookhouse, sorry. It sounded awful up in that big empty gallery. I felt so guilty and miserable. I did not need to paint my face. It was just burning red, and Aunt Elizabeth's eyes glittered fiendishly. Mr. Dare prayed a long time. He is deaf, so he did not hear Sal any more than when he had sat on her, but everyone else did, and the boys giggled. After the prayer, Mr. Morris went up to the gallery and chased Sal out. We could hear her scrambling over the seats and Mr. Morris after her. I was wild for fear he'd hurt her. I meant to spank her myself with a shingle next day, but I did not want her to be kicked. After a long time he got her out of the gallery, and she tore down the stairs and into the church, up one aisle and down the other 2 or 3 times as fast as she could go, and Mr. Morris after her with a broom. It is awfully funny to think of it now, but I did not think it so funny at the time. I was so ashamed and so afraid Sal would be hurt. Mr. Morris chased her out at last. When he sat down, I made a face at him behind my hymn book. Coming home, Aunt Elizabeth said, "I hope you have disgraced us enough tonight, Emily. I shall never take you to prayer meeting again." I am sorry I disgraced the Murrays, but I don't see how I was to blame, and anyway, I don't like prayer meeting because it is dull. But it wasn't dull that night, dear Father. Do you notice how my spelling is improved? I have thought of such a good plan. I write my letter first, and then I look up all the words I'm not sure of and correct them. Sometimes, though, I think a word is all right when it isn't. Ilse and I have given up our language. We fought over the verbs. Ilse didn't want to have any tenses for the verbs. She just wanted to have a different word altogether for every tense. I said if I was going to make a language, it was going to be a proper one, and Ilse got mad and said she had enough bother with grammar in English, and I could go and make my old language by myself. But that is no fun. So I let it go too. I was sorry because it was very interesting, and it was such fun to puzzle the other girls in school. We weren't able to get square with the French boys after all, for Ilse had sore throat all through potato picking time and couldn't come over. It seems to me that life is full of disappointments. We had examinations in school this week. I did pretty well in all except arithmetic. Miss Brownell explained something about the questions, but I was busy composing a story in my mind and did not hear her, so I got poor marks. The story is called Madge Mcpherson's Secret. I am going to buy 4 sheets of foolscap with my egg money and sew them into a book and write the story in it. I can do what I like with my egg money. I think maybe I'll write novels when I grow up, as well as poetry, but Aunt Elizabeth won't let me read any novels, so how can I find out how to write them? Another thing that worries me, if I do grow up and write a wonderful poem, perhaps people won't see how wonderful it is. Cousin Jimmy says that a man in Priest Pond, that's another location nearby, says the end of the world is coming soon. I hope it won't come till I've seen everything in it. Poor Elder Mackay has the mumps. I was oversleeping with Ilse the other night because her father was away. Ilse says her prayers now, and she said she'd bet me anything she could pray longer than me. I said she couldn't, and I prayed ever so long about everything I could think of, and when I couldn't think of anything more, I thought at first I'd begin over again. Then I thought, no, that wouldn't be honourable. A star must be honourable. So I got up and said, "You win," and Ilse never answered. I went round the bed and there she was, asleep on her knees. When I woke her up, she said we'd have to call the bet off because she could have gone on praying for ever so long if she hadn't fell asleep. After we got into bed, I told her a lot of things I wished afterwards I hadn't. Secrets. The other day in history class, Miss Brownell read that Sir Walter Raleigh had to lie in the Tower for 14 years. Perry said, wouldn't they let him get up sometimes? Then Miss Brownell punished him for impertinence. But Perry was in earnest. Ilse was mad at Miss Brownell for whipping Perry and mad at Perry for asking such a full question, as if he didn't know anything. But Perry says he is going to write a history book some day that won't have such puzzling things in it. I am finishing the disappointed house in my mind. I'm furnishing the rooms like flowers. I'll have a rose room all pink and a lily room all white and silver and a pansy room blue and gold. I wish the disappointed house could have a Christmas. It never has any Christmases. Oh, Father, I've just thought of something nice. When I grow up and write a great novel and make lots of money, I will buy the disappointed house and finish it. Then it won't be disappointed any more. Ilse's Sunday school teacher, Miss Willison, gave her a Bible for learning 200 verses. But when she took it home, her father laid it on the floor and kicked it out in the yard. Mrs. Sims says a judgment will come on him, but nothing has happened yet. The poor man is warped. That is why he did such a wicked thing. Aunt Laura took me to old Mrs. Mason's funeral last Wednesday. I like funerals. They are so dramatic. My pig died last week. It was a great financial loss to me. Aunt Elizabeth says Cousin Jimmy fed it too well. I suppose I should not have called it after Lofty John. We have maps to draw in school now. Rhoda Stewart always gets the most marks. Miss Brownell doesn't know that Rhoda just puts the map up against a window pane and the paper over it and copies it off. We used to trace things like that too, but we were meant to be. I like drawing maps. Norway and Sweden look like a tiger with mountains for stripes, and Ireland looks like a little dog with its back turned on England and its paws held up against its chest, and Africa looks like a big pork ham. Australia is a lovely map to draw. Ilse is getting on real well in school now. She says she isn't going to have me beating her. She can learn like the Dickens, as Perry says, when she tries, and she has won the silver medal, I think she means medal, for Queen's County. The WCTU in Charlottetown gave it for the best reciter. Probably the Women's Christian Temperance Union. There you go. Women against people drinking anything with alcohol. It was a thing. And yes, it was extreme. It was more extreme than it should have been. But if you actually saw the damage that was happening in families' lives that they were trying to avoid, and if you had seen that sort of thing firsthand, and it was serious damage that was happening, men beating their wives and children. Yes, it happens today too, but it was recognised that when they didn't have access to too much alcohol, that didn't happen. But their solution was to actually try and get it banned completely, which didn't help either. Anyway, they did a lot of other things as well, which were better things, more balanced. The WCTU in Charlottetown gave it for the best reciter. Hang on, I really have to take this. This is a phone call. Sorry about that. I shall be back shortly. And I'm back. Sorry about that. Phone call, and because I'm not quite sure if it's going to be to do with my parents' health, they're quite elderly, or anything like that, it's wiser if I answer the call. So I'll just catch my breath, having come up the stairs in a rush. And then we'll carry on reading. Right. The WCTU in Charlottetown gave it for the best reciter. That's the silver medal for Queen's County. There we go. They had the contest in Shrewsbury and Aunt Laura took Ilse because Dr. Burnley wouldn't, and Ilse won it. Aunt Laura told Dr. Burnley when he was here one day that he ought to give Ilse a good education. He said, "I'm not going to waste money educating any she thing," and he looked black as a thundercloud. "Oh, I wish Dr. Burnley would love Ilse. I'm so glad you loved me, Father." I think there's probably something happened to him, and he has branded all women because of what happened to him with one woman, possibly Ilse's mother. I don't know if she ran away. I don't know if she shamed him in front of everybody. I don't know if she died and left him, and he's heartbroken. But there's usually a bit of a story behind it in these sort of stories. Still catching my breath. December the 22nd. Dear Father, we had our school examination today. It was a great occasion. Almost everybody was there except Dr. Burnley and Aunt Elizabeth. All the girls wore their best dresses but me. I knew Ilse had nothing to wear but her shabby old winter's plaid, and that is too short for her, so to keep her from feeling bad, I put on my old brown dress too. Aunt Elizabeth did not want to let me do it at first because New Moon Murrays should be well dressed. But when I explained about Ilse, she looked at Aunt Laura and then said that I might. I think Aunt Elizabeth is starting to realise there's a little bit more depth to our Emily. And usually when she wants to do something, she has a good reason. Rhoda Stewart made fun of Ilse and me, but I heaped coals of fire on her head. That is what is called a figure of speech. She got stuck in her recitation. She had left the book at home, and nobody else knew the piece but me. At first I looked at her triumphantly, but then a queer feeling came into me, and I thought, what would I feel like if I was stuck before a big crowd of people like this? And besides, the honour of the school is at stake. So I whispered it to her because I was quite close. She got through the rest all right. The strange thing is, dear Father, that now I don't feel any more as if I hated her. I feel quite kindly to her, and it is much nicer. It is uncomfortable to hate people. December 28th. So this is after Christmas. Dear Father, Christmas is over. It was pretty nice. I never saw so many good things cooked all at once. Uncle Wallace and Aunt Eva and Uncle Oliver and Aunt Addie and Aunt Ruth were here. Uncle Oliver didn't bring any of his children, and I was much disappointed. We had Dr. Burnley and Ilse too. Everyone was dressed up. Aunt Elizabeth wore her black satin dress with a pointed lace collar and cap. She looked quite handsome, and I was proud of her. You like your relations to look well, even if you don't like them. Aunt Laura wore her brown silk, and Aunt Ruth had on a grey dress. Aunt Eva was very elegant. Her dress had a train, but it smelled of mothballs. I had on my blue cashmere and wore my hair tied with white ribbons, and Aunt Laura let me wear Mother's blue silk sash with the pink daisies on it that she had when she was a little girl at New Moon. Aunt Ruth sniffed when she saw me. She said, "You have grown a good deal, Emily. I hope you are a better girl." But she didn't hope it, really. I saw that quite plain. Then she told me my bootlace was untied. "She looks better," said Uncle Oliver. "I wouldn't wonder if she grew up into a strong, healthy girl after all." Aunt Eva sighed and shook her head. Uncle Wallace didn't say anything but shook hands with me. His hand was as cold as a fish. When we went out to the sitting room for dinner, I stepped on Aunt Eva's train and I could hear some stitches rip somewhere. Aunt Eva pushed me away and Aunt Ruth said, "What a very awkward child you are, Emily." I stepped behind Aunt Ruth and stuck out my tongue at her. Uncle Oliver makes a noise eating his soup. We we had all the good silver spoons out. Cousin Jimmy carved the turkeys and he gave me 2 slices of the breast because he knows I like the white meat best. Aunt Ruth said, "When I was a little girl, the wing was good enough for me." And Cousin Jimmy put another white slice on my plate. Aunt Ruth didn't say anything more then till the carving was done, and then she said, "I saw your school teacher in Shrewsbury last Saturday, Emily, and she did not give me a very good account of you. If you were my daughter, I would expect a different report." "I am very glad I am not your daughter," I said in my mind. I didn't say it out loud, of course, but Aunt Ruth said, "Please do not look so sulky when I speak to you, Emily." And Aunt Wallace said, "It is a pity she has such an unattractive expression. You are conceited and domineering and stingy," I said still in my mind. "I heard Dr. Burnley say you were." "I see there is an ink stain on her finger," said Aunt Ruth. I had been writing a poem before dinner. And then a most surprising thing happened. Relations are always surprising you. Aunt Elizabeth spoke up and said, "I do wish, Ruth, that you and Wallace would leave the child alone." I could hardly believe my ears. Aunt Ruth looked annoyed, but she did leave me alone after that and only sniffed when Cousin Jimmy slipped a bit more white meat on my plate. After that, the dinner was nice. And when they got as far as the pudding, they all began to talk, and it was splendid to listen to. They told stories and jokes about the Murrays. Even Uncle Wallace laughed, and Aunt Ruth told some things about Great Aunt Nancy. They were sarcastic, but they were interesting. Aunt Elizabeth opened Grandfather Murray's desk and took out an old poem that had been written to Aunt Nancy by a lover when she was young, and Uncle Oliver read it. Great Aunt Nancy must have been very beautiful. I wonder if anyone will ever write a poem to me. If I could have a bang, somebody might. She's really got it set in her mind that if she has a fringe cut to her hair, it would completely change how everyone relates to her. I said, "Was Great Aunt Nancy really as pretty as that?" And Uncle Oliver said, "They say she was 70 years ago." And Uncle Wallace said, "She hangs on well. She'll see the century mark yet." And Uncle Oliver said, "Oh, she's got so in the habit of living, she'll never die." Dr. Burnley told a story I didn't understand. Uncle Wallace hee-hawed right out, and Uncle Oliver put a napkin up to his face. Aunt Addie and Aunt Eva looked at each other sideways, and then at their plates, and smiled a little bit. Aunt Ruth seemed offended, and Aunt Elizabeth looked coldly at Dr. Burnley and said, "I think you forget there are children present." Dr. Burnley said, "I beg your pardon, Elizabeth," very politely. He can speak with a grand air when he likes. He is very handsome when he is dressed up and shaved. Ilse says she is proud of him even if he hates her. After dinner was over, the presents were given. That is a Murray tradition. We never have stockings or trees, but a big bran pie is passed all around with the presents buried in it, and ribbons hanging out with names on them. It was fun. My relations all gave me useful presents, except Aunt Laura. She gave me a bottle of perfume. I love it. I love nice smells. Aunt Elizabeth does not approve of perfumes. She gave me a new apron, but I am thankful to say not a baby one. The sort of apron that she had been wearing to school, which had sleeves on it and probably lots of frills and very old-fashioned, of the sort that used to put on, probably were still currently being put on some babies, which is why it was referenced as a baby apron. Aunt Ruth gave me a New Testament and said, "Emily, I hope you will read a portion of that every day until you've read it through." And I said, "Why, Aunt Ruth, I've read the whole New Testament 12 times." And so I have. I love Revelations, and I do. When I read the verse, "and the 12 gates were 12 pearls," I just saw them and the flash came. That's in her aside. Then she carries on in her talk with Aunt Ruth. "The Bible is not to be read as a storybook," Aunt Ruth said coldly. Uncle Wallace and Aunt Eva gave me a pair of black mitts, and Uncle Oliver and Aunt Addie gave me a whole $1 in nice new silver dimes, and Cousin Jimmy gave me a hair ribbon. Perry had left a silk bookmark for me. He had to go home to spend Christmas Day with his Aunt Tom at Stovepipe Town, but I saved a lot of nuts and raisins for him. I gave him and Teddy handkerchiefs. Teddy's was a little the nicest. And I gave Ilse a hair ribbon. I bought them myself out of my egg money. I will not have any more egg money for a long time because my hen has stopped laying. They do that, you know. They only lay for a certain part of the year. Everybody was happy, and once Uncle Wallace smiled right at me. I did not think him so ugly when he smiled. After dinner, Ilse and I played games in the kitchen, and Cousin Jimmy helped us make taffy. We had a big supper, but nobody could eat much because they had had such a dinner. Aunt Eva's head ached, and Aunt Ruth said she didn't see why Elizabeth made the sausages so rich, but the rest were good-humoured, and Aunt Laura kept things pleasant. She is good at making things pleasant, and after it was all over, Uncle Wallace said, this is another Murray tradition, let us think for a few moments of those who have gone before. I liked the way he said it, very solemnly and kind. It was one of the times when I am glad the blood of the Murrays flows in my veins. And I thought of you, darling father, and mother, and poor little Mike, and great-great-grandmother Murray, and of my old account book that Aunt Elizabeth burned because it seemed just like a person to me. And then we all joined hands and sang for Auld Lang Syne. Before they went home, I didn't feel like a stranger among the Murrays any more. Aunt Laura and I stood out on the porch to watch them go. Aunt Laura put her arm around me and said, your mother and I used to stand like this long ago, Emily, to watch the Christmas guests go away. The snow creaked and the bells rang back through the trees, and the frost on the pig house roof sparkled in the moonlight, and it was all so lovely, the bells and the frost and the big shining white night. Then the flash came, and that was best of all. The flash is her moment of inspiration. It's a whole seeing the world differently just for that moment. Seeing and feeling everything differently. And I'm going to stop there because that is the end of chapter 20. And chapter 21 is romantic but not comfortable, and we are not going to start that one. So there you go. Sorry for the interruptions and my coughing today. Such is life. I hope you've been managing to keep up with how the story is going. I'm going to give you, if you are watching on Twitch, my YouTube link, just in case you haven't seen it on my profile, which you should have done if you've actually been looking around at all. But if you're watching on a mobile device, it's not so easy to see while you're watching a video. So there's a link there to my YouTube channel, which is where I put my recordings from my readings. So all the books are there as a playlist per book for almost all of them. There's one where each of the books had lots and lots and lots of little stories in it, so I just did all of the books in one playlist. That's Millie Molly Mandy, which is where we started everything, and Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass are both in one playlist together because I started one book, I finished it, and then I carried on into the next book. So it was easier just to leave them all together rather than splitting them up. So if you want to catch up on some of the old stories, the recordings are up here on Twitch for 2 weeks, and then they go over to YouTube. If you are watching this on YouTube and you'd like to be part of the conversation, actually chat with me while I'm reading, and if it's between chapters or at the beginning and the end, I will directly be chatting with you. Ask me questions. If it's appropriate, I will answer them. Share experiences that you've had that are relevant for the story, that sort of thing. Suggestions of books that you've really enjoyed, questions about stories that we're reading, or even supplying answers to some of my questions about the books that we're reading. If you would like to be involved in that way, then on my YouTube channel I have a link to my Twitch channel, and if you follow that link and subscribe to Twitch, join Twitch, which is free, same as it is on YouTube, and then follow me, that's you press the little heart-shaped button, which that link would have originally taken you to, then Twitch will notify you when I start reading, when I go live, and then you can come and join in. And if you are in a different time zone to me, I'm quite happy with you just listening to the VODs. That's fine. That's the video on demand recordings. But yeah, it's a lot more fun if you actually can join in with the chat as well, as we have with some of our friends do come and join in. And it varies a lot because we all have different lives going on. I read when the timing is appropriate for where I live and the life I live. And I'm not really intending to change that just so I end up with more people who are going to be able to be involved. I love having people involved, but I'm not going to change the way I do all of my life just to be able to do this at a different time of day because it's convenient for one person. So I'm sorry about that, but that's just the way life is. But you still get to listen to the recordings. It's not like I do it live and then it's disappeared entirely and forever, is it? So there you go. I think that's about it. I hope you've enjoyed listening. I look forward to seeing you next time. And in the meantime, happy reading. Look after yourself. Find something fun to read for yourself. Bye.